Vancouver is a city known for its vibrant economy, breathtaking landscapes, and high standard of living. It's a place that attracts investors, homeowners, and businesses from around the world. However, beneath its glossy exterior, Vancouver is facing a crisis that could shake its very foundation. The city is experiencing a housing disaster, and it's only getting worse. The most alarming part? The electrical grid that powers Vancouver, an infrastructure piece that the city depends on, may be on the verge of catastrophic failure. And when that happens, it won't just be the lights that go out. The consequences could ripple through the housing market, leaving residents and investors reeling. Vancouver's electrical grid is aging, with many parts built decades ago when the city was far less populated and its infrastructure demands were lower. Fast forward to today, and Vancouver's population has grown significantly. The demand for electricity has soared, but the infrastructure has not kept up. In fact, experts have been warning for years that the grid is vulnerable to collapse. And now, in the face of climate change, Vancouver is facing an increased risk of severe weather events that could cause widespread blackouts. But it's not just about the occasional power outage anymore. If the grid fails, it could affect every aspect of life in the city, and one of the hardest hit sectors could be the housing market. In recent months, power outages in Vancouver have become more frequent, with outages lasting longer and affecting more residents. This has sparked concerns that the grid is no longer capable of supporting the city's needs. The potential impact of a complete grid failure is staggering. According to reports from BC Hydro, a blackout could leave over 1.5 million residents without power for weeks. The prospect of millions of people being plunged into darkness is enough to raise alarm bells across the region. But the worst part? This is not a problem that can be solved overnight. Vancouver's housing market is already in a precarious state. Property prices have been skyrocketing for years, and many residents are struggling to afford a home. In the face of rising mortgage rates, inflation, and a lack of available housing, the market has become increasingly unstable. Developers are facing delays due to rising construction costs and regulatory hurdles, and many are starting to pull back on new projects. The city's housing crisis has reached a point where many are questioning whether Vancouver will ever return to the booming real estate market it once knew. The failure of Vancouver's electrical grid could be the final nail in the coffin for the city's already struggling housing market. A major power outage would cripple the construction sector, halting projects across the city and delaying the completion of new homes. Developers who were already struggling to make ends meet would be faced with additional obstacles. The supply chain would be disrupted, and materials that were already in short supply would become even harder to find. With construction sites at a standstill, Vancouver could see the value of its real estate plummet. But it doesn't stop there. Power outages in Vancouver could have far-reaching consequences beyond the construction sector. As the electrical grid weakens, so too will the economy. Businesses rely on a stable power supply to operate efficiently, and without it, many could be forced to shut down. Retailers, restaurants, and small businesses could face long-term closures, sending shockwaves through the local economy. People would lose jobs, incomes would shrink, and many homeowners would be left struggling to keep up with their mortgage payments. The city's housing market, already grappling with rising rates and declining demand, would likely experience an even steeper decline. One of the most disturbing consequences of a power grid failure would be the loss of value in Vancouver's real estate. The city's housing market is already fragile, and a complete blackout could make the situation much worse. Homeowners who have invested everything into their properties could see their investments wiped out overnight. Many are already feeling the pressure as the housing market shows signs of slowing down, and a power grid failure would only add to their worries. For homeowners who rely on the value of their properties for retirement or wealth accumulation, the potential loss could be devastating. And for first-time buyers, the prospect of purchasing a home in a market that is already unpredictable could be enough to make them reconsider their plans. The political response to Vancouver's electrical grid failure has been underwhelming at best. Local leaders and government officials have been promising to address the issue for years, but little has been done to improve the infrastructure. Vancouver's electrical grid was built decades ago and has not been upgraded to meet the growing needs of the city. The lack of action on this front is a failure of leadership, and it's one that could have serious consequences for residents and businesses alike. The city's political leaders are reluctant to make difficult decisions, and as a result, the grid continues to deteriorate. The failure of the electrical grid is also a symptom of a larger issue, Vancouver's political dysfunction. The The city has been slow to address many of the issues facing its housing market, from high prices to a lack of available housing. Developers are frustrated with the bureaucratic red tape that hinders their ability to build new homes, and residents are feeling the pinch as property prices continue to climb. The government's response to the housing crisis has been inadequate, and the failure to address the weaknesses in the electrical grid only highlights the city's larger infrastructure problems. As the grid weakens, so too does the economy. The power outages that have plagued the city in recent months are a warning sign of things to come. Vancouver's residents are already dealing with the stress of living in a city where the cost of living continues to rise. The added strain of power failures could push many people to their breaking point. For those who rely on electricity for basic needs, whether it's heating their homes, running medical equipment, or simply cooking dinner, the consequences could be dire. It's not just a matter of inconvenience, it's a matter of survival. The ripple effects of a power grid failure would be felt throughout the city. Small business owners who rely on consistent electricity to keep their operations running would be hit hardest. Without power, they would be unable to serve customers, keep inventory stocked, or pay their employees. For many businesses, this could mean the end of the road. In an already struggling economy, the loss of these businesses could be devastating. The economic fallout would likely lead to job losses, further exacerbating the housing crisis as more people are unable to afford the high cost of living in Vancouver. For Vancouver residents, the potential for a grid collapse is a deeply unsettling reality. Many are already feeling the effects of rising housing costs, and the prospect of being without power for weeks could make things much worse. As the grid weakens, the city's real estate market becomes even more unpredictable. Developers and investors who were once eager to enter the Vancouver market are now hesitant, as the threat of a power failure looms large. The city's reputation as a thriving real estate market is at risk, and the consequences for homeowners could be severe. In the face of this crisis, the question remains, what can be done to protect Vancouver's residents and its housing market? The answer lies in urgent action. Vancouver's political leaders must step up and address the weaknesses in the electrical grid before it's too late. The city's infrastructure needs an overhaul, and the time to act is now. If Vancouver is to survive this crisis, it will require bold leadership, investment in the city's future, and a commitment to protecting its residents. But will the city's leaders rise to the challenge, or will they let Vancouver's electrical grid and its housing market fall into ruin? As Vancouver's housing market teeters on the edge of collapse, the looming threat of an electrical grid failure is just one of the many challenges facing the city. While Vancouver has long been known for its thriving real estate market, its rapid growth has come at a cost. The city's infrastructure, particularly its electrical grid, has struggled to keep up with the demands of a growing population. And now, that failure is starting to show. For years, experts have warned that Vancouver's electrical grid is outdated and vulnerable to failure. Yet, despite repeated warnings, little has been done to address the issue. Power outages have become increasingly common, with residents in some parts of the city facing frequent disruptions. What's more concerning is the potential for a complete collapse of the grid, which could leave millions of people without power for weeks or even months. The possibility of this happening is more than just a nuisance. It could trigger a full-blown crisis that impacts every facet of Vancouver life. The electrical grid is the backbone of the city, powering everything from homes to businesses to critical infrastructure. If the grid fails, it won't just affect the lights, it could lead to widespread chaos. Construction projects would come to a halt, leaving unfinished buildings and stalled developments in their wake. Developers, who are already struggling to deal with rising costs and delays, would be unable to proceed with new projects. In a city where housing supply is already tight, this could make the housing crisis even worse. The value of homes could plummet as investors and homeowners alike lose confidence in the market. The construction industry is one of the most vulnerable sectors in Vancouver, and a complete grid failure could be the death knell for many projects. From residential developments to commercial buildings, the halt in construction would have a devastating impact on Vancouver's real estate market. With fewer homes being built, demand would outstrip supply, driving prices even higher. For those already struggling to afford a home, this could be a blow from which the city may never recover. As the grid weakens, businesses in Vancouver would also feel the effects. Retailers, restaurants, and small businesses depend on a reliable power supply to keep their operations running. Without electricity, they would be forced to shut down, possibly for an extended period. This would not only affect the businesses themselves, but also the thousands of employees who rely on these jobs to make a living. As businesses close and job losses mount, the economic impact would be felt throughout the city. Vancouver's economy could be plunged into a recession, with the ripple effects spreading to every sector, from retail to real estate to hospitality. The human cost of this disaster cannot be overstated. For homeowners, a power grid failure would be more than just an inconvenience, it would be a financial catastrophe. Many people have invested their life savings into their homes, and the value of those homes could plummet if the grid fails. For those with mortgages, the collapse of the housing market could lead to widespread defaults, as homeowners struggle to keep up with rising rates and falling property values. As the housing market collapses, more people could lose their homes, and the financial stress could have lasting effects on Vancouver's residents. Already, the situation is becoming dire for many families. Homeowners who bought in recent years, when prices were at their peak, are now seeing the value of their homes drop. In some cases, the value has fallen by tens of thousands of dollars, leaving homeowners with little equity and mounting debt. Many families are facing financial ruin, with no clear path forward. The stress of trying to keep up with mortgage payments, combined with the uncertainty of a housing market that's spiraling out of control, is taking its toll on Vancouver's residents. For renters, the situation is just as grim. As the housing market falters, the demand for rental properties continues to grow. Rent prices are rising rapidly, making it harder for people to find affordable housing. With fewer properties available and more people competing for the limited supply, renters are finding themselves priced out of the market. Many are forced to take on multiple jobs or move into overcrowded conditions just to make ends meet. The middle class is disappearing, and the dream of owning a home in Vancouver seems more out of reach than ever. The failure of the electrical grid is just one symptom of the larger problems facing Vancouver. The city has long struggled with an inadequate supply of housing, rising costs, and a lack of affordable options for its residents. Vancouver has become a city of extremes: high prices for those who can afford them, and overcrowded, underfunded living conditions for those who can't. The housing market has become a game for the wealthy, with little regard for the people who actually live and work in the city. The city's political leadership has been slow to address these issues. Despite the growing crisis, politicians have been hesitant to make bold moves that could solve the problem. Efforts to cool the housing market through measures like a foreign buyer ban have had little effect, and the government has done little to address the underlying infrastructure problems that are contributing to the crisis. The failure to modernize Vancouver's electrical grid is a glaring example of the city's inability to address its infrastructure needs. Without action, the city could find itself facing even greater challenges in the future. What Vancouver needs is a comprehensive plan to address both the housing crisis and the infrastructure weaknesses that are threatening the city's future. The electrical grid is just one part of the puzzle, but it's a crucial one. If Vancouver's leaders don't take action soon, the city could face even bigger problems down the road. The time for complacency is over. The city needs urgent action to protect its residents, its economy, and its future. As we look to the future, the question remains: can Vancouver rise to the challenge, or will it continue down the path of neglect, allowing its infrastructure to crumble and its housing market to collapse? The city's future is at a crossroads, and the choices made in the coming months will determine whether Vancouver remains a thriving, vibrant city or a cautionary tale of what happens when a city fails to adapt to the needs of its residents. If you're watching this and feeling the weight of the crisis, you're not alone. Thousands of Vancouver residents are wondering how much longer they can hold on before the crisis becomes too much to bear. But there's still time to act. We must demand action from our political leaders. We must push for investment in our infrastructure and for policies that put the people of Vancouver first. This is not just a real estate problem, it's a question of survival for the city. And if you want to stay informed about the ongoing housing crisis and what's at stake for Vancouver's future, make sure to hit the subscribe button and leave a comment with Hashone to show that you're paying attention. Vancouver's future may be uncertain, but together, we can make our voices heard. Stay tuned for more updates on the crisis, because the fight for Vancouver's future is far from over.